Hello everyone. Today we will see one more program in which we will write a function which will take two lists and it will return true if any number is common between them. So our requirement is we have to write a function which will take two lists as a parameter, and that function should check if those two lists contains any common value between them. If there is any common value between them, then it should return true, otherwise it should return false. For example, let's say these are the two lists, mylist1 and mylist2. If you see in mylist1 and mylist2 elements, is there any common element here? Yes, if you see 44 is a common element which is present in mylist1 as well as mylist2. That means it should return true. So whatever function we will write which takes two lists as a parameter, it should check if there is any common value between these two lists, and if there is a common value then it should return true, and if there is no common value it should return false. So if you see here, mylist1 and mylist2, there are no common parameters. There is no common value in between these two lists. So if you pass this mylist1 and mylist2 into a function, it should not return a true, it should return false because there is no common value. Now let's see in programmatically how we can do that. Let's create a new Python file. We have created a Python file. In this Python file, let's use these two lists. So in the Python file, we have mylist1 as well as mylist2. Now we are going to write one function. How to write a function? By using def keyword. I am naming that function as, let's say, common value, and that function should accept two lists. In that function we are passing two lists, let's say list1 and list2. These are the two parameters which we are passing. After passing this parameter, what we are going to do? We have to check whether there is any common value between list1 and list2. How we can do that? So the logic is like this. We will check first value of mylist1, that is 100. We will compare this with all the values of mylist2. We will first compare the 100 with 123. We will compare 100 with 88. Then we will compare 100 with 44. Then we will compare 100 with 448. And then we will compare 100 with 5998. First value we will compare with all the values of second list in the first iteration. After that we will again compare the second value of mylist1 to all the values of mylist2. Then we will compare third value with all the values of mylist2. Then we will fourth compare with all the value of mylist2. After that we will compare fifth value of mylist1 to all other values of mylist2. So here if you see, we have to use two iterations. First iteration is for mylist1 values, in which we will increase after comparing with mylist2 values. So for that we will use first iteration for x in mylist1. So for x in mylist1, that is the first iteration for mylist1, which will store 100 first, 2 first, 2, then 333, 44, 555 and so on. And second iteration we will require for mylist2, so that in this we will compare for, let's say, y in mylist2. So for y in mylist2, not mylist1, but this is the list1, so we have to pass list1 here. We have to pass list1 and this is the list2 that we can pass here. So for y in list2, Then what we can do, we will simply check if x equals to y. If that is true, that means we can simply return true. If that value matches, for example, what will happen is the flow is like this. For x in list 1, so in the first iteration 100 will be stored in a x, and we will check for y in list 2. That means for this y iteration what will happen, it will pick 1 2 3 first. It will check whether that 1 2 3 is equals to 100. It is not equal to 100, so it will not enter, it will not return true. So in that situation it should return false. So we will return false here. If that is not matching, then we will return false. In the first iteration it will check 100 with 123, then it will check 100 with 88, 100 with 44, 100 with 448, 100 with 5998. After that, in the next iteration, x value will change to 2. So 2 will be stored in x. It will again iterate all the elements from my list 2 in y iteration, right? So for first it will store 2 in x. It will check 1 2 3 with 2. Then in the next iteration it will check 88 with 2. Then again it will check 44 with 2, 448 with 2, 5998 with 2. It will not match. So again it will go to third iteration. In this time 333 will be stored in x, and again it will loop for all the elements of my list 2. It will check 333 with 123, 333 with 88, 333 with 44, and so on. When it will match, so when x in the next iteration 44 will be stored in x, it will check 44 with 123, 44 with 88, 44 with 44. So now it will match. So when it matches, it will return true. Otherwise, it will return false. So now let's execute this file, but before that we have to call this function. So let's call the function. So I am just calling this function. In this we can pass this mylist1 as a parameter, first list, and we can also pass mylist2 as a second parameter. So mylist1 will be passed here as a list1, mylist2 passed here as a list2. Then we are using two iterations for x and for y. So x is for list1, in which we are picking the first value, and then the y loop, in which we are checking with each and every element of mylist2. If value of x and y matches, then it should return true. Now let's execute this file. So we cannot see any output because we haven't used print statement. So we have to use print, and then we have to call the function. So now let's execute it. It is returning true because there is one common value between mylist1 and mylist2. That's why it is returning value as true. Now what we will do, we will change the list. So now instead of 44, I will just add 446. So now in this two list there is no common element. So it should return false now. If you see, when we execute this file, it is returning the value as false because there is no common value between mylist1 and mylist2. So this is how we can simply write the logic by using two loops to check whether there are any common element present in list. So this is how we can use two for loops to check whether there is a common element between two lists. Thanks for watching this video.